Have you ever noticed that there's a lot of information about empaths that kind of puts them in a victim mentality? Take a look at this thumbnail. And take a look at this skit. Me? I don't know. Life actually really sucks right now. Yes, I am totally picking on myself right now, but the truth is that that information, similar to that, is out there everywhere. And to an extent, it's important information because we want to understand some of the challenges of being an empath, right? We definitely want to look at that. But if we're not careful, we can tend to view being an empath as a very disempowering, weak, and that puts us in a victim mentality. And the problem with victim mentality is that sometimes we don't view what we can do to grow. We don't view what we can do to strengthen our abilities, what we can do. We don't examine what we can do to empower ourselves because we think, right, when we're in victim mentality, we think that there's no choice. And think about what that means if you are only looking at the challenges of an empath. For example, there are sayings like, empaths are narcissist magnets. Well, a magnet has no choice but to attract. It's designed to do that. In essence, what you're saying is that no matter what, that you will always be destined to be in a relationship with a narcissistic person. In alignment with my thumbnail, empaths are emotional sponges. Well, a sponge is designed to soak up whatever it's around, right? That's its job. Does that mean it's the job of the empath to do that and that they are destined to forever be soaking up other people's energy, which means if they're around people with negative energy, they're going to be soaking that up and suffering for the rest of their life? No. Recently, when I was looking up information about being an empath and what it means and how to strengthen your empathic abilities, I really saw the need to shift from victim, not only to survivor, but to thriver, because who wants to just make it by as an empath, right? Trying not to soak up other people's energy. It just doesn't sound very exciting. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I found in my research recently that I found very interesting. I'm going to share it with you. And the three things I want to share in this video with you are, what is an empath and how exactly are they different from people that aren't empaths? And in that section of the video, you'll be able to kind of look at certain characteristics and examine yourself and see if you really do fall into that category. The second part of this video is going to be about how a lot of empaths wound up developing this ability, which if you've been through narcissistic abuse, if you're battling complex PTSD, it's very interesting to see the connection. Okay, and the final part of the video, which is probably the most important, is some strategies that I give to my clients that help them to strengthen their empathic abilities. Hopefully it can help you as well. So make sure you stick to the end of the video. What is an empath and how are they different from other people that aren't empaths? Quick definition that I found interesting is that empaths are gifted at detecting, reading, and processing the energy around them. On a side note, energy is simply emotion in motion, okay? It's what people are feeling. It's what is projected out of a person. It's usually what they're feeling either about themselves or about other people. Somebody that has empathy can listen to a story, right? And as the person is describing a scenario that they're going through, the person with empathy can imagine what that would feel like. I've heard people say that somebody that has high empathy can feel someone else's pain in their heart. So how is being an empath different? Well, the way I see it, somebody that's an empath doesn't just feel the other person's pain in their heart in the sense that they're imagining and they're understanding what that pain is, but they're feeling the pain as if it's their own. So whatever that person is feeling is felt by the empath. Someone with empathy kind of has to know what that person is feeling, right? They're being told a story, something is being explained to them, and then therefore they are displaying empathy. But an empath can pick up what's being felt underneath what the person is saying. So in other words, somebody is very happy, or they're acting very happy. They've got a smile on their face. They're trying to show you that life is great, right? An empath feels what that person is really feeling. If there's a deep sadness, if there's a depression, suddenly the empath is feeling sad and depressed, as if those feelings are their own. The difference between having empathy and being an empath is you may be soaking up feelings that you don't know why they're there. Whereas in order to have empathy, you have to understand what the person is going through. You have to have some kind of conversation that reveals to you what they're going through. So hopefully that kind of helps you to understand a little bit of the difference between empaths and somebody high with empathy. I actually heard it explained recently on a video where someone said that people that are empaths can be likened to a screen door, right? And people that are not empaths can be likened to people that have like a glass door that separates their home from the outside. Obviously, the glass door gives more protection from the outside elements. The wind isn't going to get to you, rain isn't going to get to you. There's more protection, it's more solid. Whereas the screen is more porous. There is some protection because obviously it's going to keep mosquitoes out, it's going to keep animals out, but the elements like the wind or rain are going to be able to penetrate you. And they described that. I thought it was such a neat way of describing how somebody with empathy and somebody that's an empath differ, because the filter that's around somebody that's an empath is more porous. So they are more susceptible to the elements or the energy of people around them. Let's move on to the second part of the video, where I just want to kind of mention how a lot of empaths wind up developing this ability, okay? I'm not saying this is like my word is law, but this is my opinion, but this is what I've come to learn as I was studying and looking up this information and just learning about it through the years. A lot of empaths wind up being people that found themselves in relationships with narcissists, right? A lot of empaths, we've established that happens, but let's peel it back a little bit more, because that usually happens because in childhood, they probably had a parent that wasn't emotionally safe. So a lot of children had to become hypervigilant to what their surroundings were, to what their caregiver was feeling. They had to be hypervigilant because it was a matter of safety. And so they developed that ability to read people, to know what was needed, to feel the energy, because it was a survival or coping skill. It kind of makes me think of if somebody had sight up until the age of 30, let's say, right? And they lose their sight. Oftentimes their auditory skills are heightened, and they learn to hear things that in the past they might have heard, but they never really paid attention to. But because of the need, now that skill is heightened, well, it's the same thing with empathy. It can be the result of having to be hypervigilant in childhood. A lot of empaths grew up in homes where there were no physical or emotional boundaries. And if you don't understand that there are no boundaries, you grow up thinking that's normal. And that's why when you're around people, you have no emotional boundary with yourself, and you don't put an emotional boundary with others, so everything's just kind of getting mixed up and kind of swirling inside of you and not feeling very good. So just touching base with where it comes from. Obviously, there's a lot of debate whether an empath is born an empath or whether they develop empathy because of their upbringing. Again, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get to the most important part of this video, which is how do you shift from victim to survivor and then to thriver? I think the first step is to kind of recognize the point in this video, which is it's a choice. You really do have a choice in the matter. You are not put on this planet to absorb everyone's energy. You are not put on this planet to be in relationships with people that are going to hurt you. You have to recognize and take responsibility for the fact that you can strengthen your empathic abilities. You can grow. You can take these empathic weaknesses, so people make them seem, and turn them into an amazing power. Okay, but the first thing you have to do is realize that you have to take responsibility. Otherwise, you will stay in relationships that are toxic because, after all, empaths attract narcissists, therefore that's going to be my life. No, you don't want to do that. You have to take responsibility for the fact that you can grow, you can get to an empowered state. Step number 2 is to start taking care of yourself emotionally. Empaths tend to be extremely externally focused, right? Especially if they developed that in childhood. They had to be aware of their surroundings, and now it's like second nature. You're so aware of what everyone else is feeling, what everyone else needs, that you're not taking care of your own needs. So some things that you need to start asking yourself, how do you feel? If you're going to do something, do you really want to do it? Or are you pushing yourself and denying your needs to make someone else's needs met? Or if you're around a certain person that doesn't feel good, maybe this person is constantly draining you. Maybe this person never makes you feel appreciated, but you think you have to be there for them because they have needs, right? And they call you when they need you, right? So they're always looking for you when they need advice, when they need something, and you think you need to be there for them, but it comes at a cost of self. If you're in relationships like that, you're hurting yourself to make other people happy. And the only way you can shift from being a victim as an empath into survivor and then thriver is by recognizing that sometimes it's up to you to cut the relationship. If it doesn't feel good, if it's hurting you, if you are giving to the point that you are depleted, and that person's happy, right? Because they give very little, but they're taking a lot from you. You have to care enough about your emotional needs to put an end to any relationship that is harming you. Number 3 is to strengthen your gut instinct. If you're around certain people and you get a vibe or you get something that tells you, hey, this isn't good for you, start listening and paying attention to it. I think most empaths hear that voice that's warning them. They hear the voice that's trying to protect them, but then they override it. And that only keeps you from utilizing your strengths, okay? So start listening to what your gut instinct is telling you in reference to what's going on around you or what's happening with someone else, or what boundaries are in place and what boundaries are being crossed. Start trusting yourself. Number 4 is to practice identifying the boundary of where somebody else's energy ends and where your energy begins. Okay, this is something that I tell a lot of my clients in my face-to-face coaching practice. When they're battling the fact that they are soaking up energy around them and it's bringing them down and they're having a hard time holding on to their own energy, I'll tell them, start practicing to identify what that other person's energy is, state it, right? Validate it, and then check in with self and ask yourself, what's my energy? And make that distinction. This is their energy and this is my energy. If you don't do that, your energy might be high, right? But then you get around somebody whose energy is low, and have you ever noticed? It's like all of a sudden you can't hold your high energy and there's this heaviness on you. It's because you've noticed their energy, and like that screen, it's come through to you, and without identifying and realizing that they're allowed to have that energy and you're still allowed to stay in your energy, without that emotional boundary, they've intertwined and you've soaked it up. The way to stop that is to practice identifying what their energy is, noticing what your energy is, and then sometimes you might have to repeat the phrase in your mind, they're allowed to have that energy, and I'm allowed to have my energy. It's almost like we have to give ourselves mental permission. But that kind of makes sense if you were raised in a dynamic where your own emotional state wasn't safe. So as a child, you weren't allowed to hold on to your own energy. You weren't allowed to have your feelings. And as a coping skill, it's showing up in your adult life. So that phrase, they're allowed to be in a bad mood, I'm still allowed to feel happy inside, is going to help you. Don't view being an empath as something negative, as something that's going to mean that you're going to suffer for the rest of your life. No. Being an empath is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But you do have to train your empathic abilities, and I hope these tips helped.